Okay, colored pens up. Let's see how we're doing. Number 1, how many months?
8.
Start with Natalie, then we'll go to Annie, and then Adriana. We got 8.
8.
Wow, everybody thinks it's 8. That is correct. It is 8 months. Very good. 8 months. Number 2, what did we get when you evaluate that? We'll start with George, then David, and then Kiara. George.
I got positive 24. Positive 24. Positive 24.
The correct answer is positive 24. I love the way they said positive. We're talking about integers a lot now. It's very important to be able to be clear about positive versus negative. Number 3, what did we get? We'll start with Stephen, Chelsea, Catalina.
Positive 6. Positive 6. Positive 6.
Correct answer is positive 6. Now things start to get a little trickier. Number 4, what did we get? Start with Alexis, Fancy, and then Tatiana.
Negative 9. I didn't do that one.
It wasn't an optional question. I'll come back to you for another one. Tatiana? The correct answer is negative 9. Very good. Number 5, what did we get? We will start this time with Angela, and then we'll go to Essence, and then Valerie.
Negative 15. 15.
So we have a disagreement. Negative 15, Valerie says 15. Anyone want to chime in with their answers, see how we feel about it? Nali?
Negative 15.
The correct answer is negative 15. However, I would understand why you would think it was positive 15, but I will clear that one up in a couple of minutes. Number 6, what did we get? Number 6. Just one person in the room was able to get number 6. Oh, we got a whole bunch of people. We'll start with Stephen, Savannah, and then back to Tatiana.
Positive 29. I got positive 11.
Okay, so we have a disagreement, Tatiana.
Positive 29.
The correct answer is positive 29. Number 7, what do we get? Number 7, we will start with Cameron S., Tristan, and then Adriana.
Positive 35.
Positive what?
Positive 3.
Positive 3, so we have a disagreement. What do you think, Adriana?
Positive 35.
Positive
35.
35. Correct answer is positive 35. So, we're going to talk about numbers 5 and 4, and then we're going to talk about number 1. So let's talk first about number 5. How can you say that expression? What's one way to say that? The part that I highlighted. What's one way to say that expression? Nobody knows how to say it. One person. Catalina, how do you say that?
Negative 15.
Well, we're not talking about the value. I just want to know the expression that I highlighted. Okay? George? Negative y. Very good. That's negative y. Is there another way to say it? Chelsea?
Opposite of y.
Very good. The opposite of y. So sometimes you need to think of things in terms of negative, but sometimes it's helpful to think of it as opposite. And so if you realize that that's the opposite of y, and this is what y is right now, then what's the opposite of that? It's, Angela?
15.
15. Very good. So now let's rewrite the whole expression. We used this, so that's now a 15, but we did not use this. So this is the expression now. Chelsea just taught us that this symbol really means the opposite of. So what's the opposite of 15? Negative 15. Number 4 was a similar scenario, except there was absolute value involved. So now we know that that means the opposite of x. And here's x. So what's the opposite of negative 9? Aman? 9. So if we rewrite the whole thing, what we end up with is this. That's the absolute value of 9. What's the absolute value of 9? What's the absolute value of 9? Justin? 9. So now again, it's still 9, but now we're taking the opposite of it, and that's why we get negative 9. Very good. Before we get into question number 1, because I'm going to be changing the page, let's get an overall score. There were 7 questions. Hopefully you got 5 out of 7, or 6 out of 7, or maybe even 7 out of 7. And then calculate your percent. I think 5 out of 7 is a 71% or something like that. Now let's talk about number 1. Give me a thumbs up if you got number 1 correct. I got 1. I got some people who are not sure about their thumbs. Thumbs up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Good. Put your thumbs down. So 2/3 of my class got this right. That's good. But 1/3 of my class not sure what to do. So where are my thumbs up, people? Someone give me a starting point. What'd you start by doing? Essence?
First I started because last time you told us that we need to identify the
Okay, well just tell me what it is.
well the one I don't know what they're called, but I know the one-time fee is $275.
Good.
And
Well, let me stop you there. Does anyone know what we call in this question, it's a one-time fee. What did I call it? George?
flat fee.
Flat fee. A one-time fee and a flat fee is really the same thing, but in essence, you did a great job. That wasn't really the first thing I told you to find, but that's good enough. So we know that that's 275. Very good, Essence. Keep going. You're doing great. Wow. What did you do next?
And then I did the pay per month, how much you have to pay per month, which was $4.95.
Very good. Can I have another volunteer, since she wasn't sure what to call that, remind us of what it's called? Nolly?
The rate.
The rate. Very good. So we found the flat fee or the flat number, and we found the rate. Essence, keep going. You're doing a fabulous job.
And then I had to find the total.
Total, which is actually the first thing I've told you to find. And what is the total in this, Essence?
954.66.
Very good. If you can identify those pieces of information and then identify what is missing, identify what's missing, you have these pieces, you can figure it out. Okay? Catalina, what'd you do?
I subtracted 954.60 from 275.
Well, you said it a little backwards, but I think I understand what you meant. So you did 954 minus 275, is that correct?
Yeah.
And you get 600 something?
669.60.
Good?
And then I got that and started. But no, then I got 849.95, and then I started adding it until I got to a number close to 669.60.
Okay. Okay, that's a great method. Does anyone have a good idea of what she could have done to make her life a little bit easier from this point? Savannah?
Do 669.60, then minus divide it by the $84.95.
Divide it by $84.95. Because that's what you're basically doing is you're taking away the one-time fee. This is how much money is paid for the months. So if each month costs $84.95 and we divide the total you paid for months, you divide these two numbers, you'll get how many months. So pick up your calculator and everyone punch in 669.60 divided by 84.95.
Mr. Gallo.
She did.
Okay?
I have a question. I got another answer.
What did you get?
I got 679.
That's what I got.
679? Okay, let me just double check. Maybe I wrote the wrong thing down.
Yeah, I
No,
got
not a big deal. 954 minus 275. Okay, so it's 679. I wrote the wrong number. That's my fault. So this was supposed to be 79.
But I still got the same
Okay. Sorry about that. It's supposed to be 679. But I wanted to clarify that Catalina's method was great. She thought through it. That was great. So she used her brain power to work her way through it. But what I'm trying to emphasize at this point is that you have to start learning how to take an operation that you're doing repeatedly and replace it with the correct operation. So she went back and took 84.95 and kept adding it to itself over and over and over again until she got too close to that number. That's what she said. But she, again, could have saved herself tons of trouble and time if she just recognized that what she was really doing was dividing by 84.95. Any comments or questions on how we did this? Eventually, we are going to take this and use algebra to solve it. We're not ready for that yet, but we will be soon. Any questions? Good. Put the warm-up to the side. Okay, today we're going to be discussing the idea of adding integers. Now, most of you were introduced to the idea last year. I may start going pretty quickly today. I may skip over some methods because you guys may show that you already got this down. But I want to clear up a couple things. Last year, if you had Ms. Cooper, she taught you some tricks for working with different things. Give me a thumbs up if you've heard the phrase keep, change, change. Thumbs up for keep, change, change. Okay, a lot of us, but not all of us. Good, put your thumbs down. So that was a trick she taught you to deal with subtracting integers. Okay, so that's a trick, and it works, and it's great. There are no real tricks for adding integers. There are some complicated ones, but I don't think they work very well. So rather than worry about tricks, we're going to really try and develop a deeper understanding of what's going on when you're adding integers. Being able to add integers is the foundation for a lot of other ideas. So you really got to get this down today. Okay? So I'm going to be using a visual approach. So here's how it works. A circle, a drawn circle with a plus sign in it means one positive. A drawn circle with a negative symbol inside of it means one negative. I also have placed on your desk chips that actually represent this. Actually write it. So when I ask you to represent a number, we're going to represent a number with a drawing. I'm also going to have you do it with the chips that we have on our desk. So, for example, and everyone's going to draw it first. If you would draw 3 circles with plus signs in it, and that means positive 3. So, positive 3 is the number. This is a picture representing this number. Well, what if I want to represent a negative number? Negative 4. So I have the number negative 4, and here's a picture representing it. It's 4 little circles with negative signs in them. So now if you would take your chips and represent positive 3 using the chips and a negative 4 using the chips, and put them on your desk up towards the top in the corner. So the question is, What does it equal when we add those two numbers together? Does anyone already know? What does it equal when we add those two numbers together? Dave? It does equal -1, but we want to explore why and how can we represent that. So, it is all based on one major idea. Here is the major idea. One positive chip plus one negative chip equals 0. Another way to say that is one positive chip and one negative chip cancels each other out. So Amani is going to allow me to work with hers. So here's what you do. Every time you have one positive and one negative, they cancel each other out. You take them and they go away. She's got another positive and another negative. Those go away. Another positive and another negative. Those go away. What's left over on your desk, Amani? Just a negative. One negative is left. That's why it's equal to -1. Okay? So, now you do it yourself. Match up a positive and a negative, a positive and a negative, and a positive and a negative, until you have just one negative left over. And that's the visual method. That's the chip method of adding integers. Does anyone have any questions on how that works? Now, if you had to add -150 plus 75, that wouldn't be a very practical method, the chip method, because then I'd have to give you a whole lot of chips. So we have to figure out how can we translate this method to something that we can do maybe in our brain or with a picture or something, a hand-drawn picture, something, some way of not having to need a bucket full of chips. Okay? And that's what we're going to do now. And here's the idea. Not only does one positive and one negative equal 0, but the sum of any number and its additive inverse, its opposite. Any number and its opposite is going to give you 0. If you can understand this major idea, then you should have, I'm not saying no trouble, but you should have little trouble with adding integers. The sum of any number and its opposite. It's called the additive inverse. I also have it here on my wall of properties. The inverse property of addition says that when you add a number and its opposite, you get 0, or they cancel each other out. So I'm going to show you some examples. Make sure you have them down so that you can start building this set of examples in your head that you can use all the time to help yourself solve problems. So here we go. -1 and +1. -1 plus 1 is 0. We already figured that one out. But +10 and -10. Those are opposites. When you add them together, you get 0. +2 plus -2. You add them together, you get 0. -25, +25. Add them together, you get 0. So all of these, they all equal 0. They all have a value of 0 because the opposites are canceling each other out. -5 and 5 also equals 0. And because you are in advanced pre-algebra class, we put in the algebra version of this. -x and +x will also equal 0. So we're going to start out doing some questions using a modeling method. Then we're going to start using this idea in a more advanced way in hopes that our brains start catching on to how this stuff works. Okay? You can use the chips on your desk, but I really haven't given you enough to really do much. It was more of just to get you started with the idea. Okay? You can leave them on your desk. I'll get them from you in a little while. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, so let's start figuring out some expressions. So my students in the room who are already confident with this, please just stick with me for a few minutes, and I promise you that we'll be at more challenging questions and things will move a little bit faster for you. My students who are still uncertain of themselves, follow along. So we want to add -3 and -6. We're going to start out by modeling the first number. We're going to draw a picture. So I want to model 3 negatives, and so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3 little circles, and they're all negatives, so I'm going to put a negative sign in them. Does anyone have any questions on how I modeled the -3? So this is modeling that. Now I need to model the -6. Underneath the -3, I'm going to model the -6. I'm going to draw 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they're all negative, so I'm going to model 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so now I've modeled -6. Does anyone have any questions on how we did the model? Now I'm going to start canceling. What did I say would cancel each other out? What was the first instance that I explained would cancel each other out? Stephen?
One positive and one negative.
Very good. So what I want to do is I want to try and find one positive and one negative to cancel them out. Just like I had you do with the chips on your desk. So do I have one positive and one negative to cancel out?
No.
No. Could someone make a statement about what I have here? What do I have? Adriana?
You have both of them are negatives.
They're all negatives. So this is an easy question to find the answer to. This is a pile of negatives. This is a pile of negatives. When I add them together, I'm just making one big pile of negatives. So all I have to do is add them together. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 negatives, or what would I say is the answer, Catalina?
Oh no, I was just gonna make a statement because Ms. Cooper taught us that the signs are the same, keep them the same, and just add.
Right?
And then for the subtraction, if the signs are different, find the difference, keep the sign of the greater value.
That's fine. And if that works for you, that's great. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Okay? So here's the value, -9. But you said some very important things. And I want to just pause for a second to explain my rule in this room. My rule for my class. I don't care how you do it. I want you to be successful. What do I mean by successful? I want you to get the questions right every time. If you can use a method that I've never myself seen ever, and it gets you the right answer every time, I don't care. Use it. I want you to use what works for you. So if what I teach you today does not work for you, then don't use it. But you have to do something. You can't just use magic. Here's my analogy, and I'll use basketball as my analogy because I like basketball. So if you're a basketball player in 8th grade, you're trying to make the basketball team, and you run up and go like this, and it goes in the basket, and the coach looks at you funny, and then you go like this, and it goes in the basket again, and you do that every time, and it goes in every single time, guess what the coach is going to say? Keep doing it. Because guess what? You're going to keep doing this. It doesn't look very pretty, but it's going to go in every time, and guess what? We're going to win. Now, this is how you're supposed to shoot a basketball. You're supposed to shoot a basketball like this. That's the motion you're supposed to use. So if you can do this, that's great. But not everybody can. The coach is not going to care which way you do it if the ball goes in every time. Now, if you go like this, and it misses the backboard, and it misses the hoop, and it goes through the door, and it rolls outside, the coach is not going to be thrilled and he's going to tell you to stop and do something different, right? So if you are doing a problem and you get it wrong every time, then your method doesn't work and we have to find a different method. This is my rule for my classroom for today and for the rest of the year. If you are Harry Potter in disguise and you can do math magically, do it. I don't care. What am I going to tell you not to use magic? Use magic. Great. All right, does anyone have any questions about that? Good. So let's try to expand on our understanding and let's look at part B. Now I want to add 8 and negative 7. 8 and negative 7. So I'm going to model the first number by drawing 8 and they're all positive, so got to indicate that. And now I need to model 7 negatives, or negative 7. My students were having trouble with the chips. I'm sorry, I know it's different to have these on your desk, but can we just keep them on your desk and not have them falling all over? We're going to put the 7 directly underneath the 8. And these are negatives. Now, Stephen helped us a few minutes ago, and he said what we're really looking for is one positive and one negative to cancel each other out. So here's one positive and one negative that cancels each other out. Here's one positive and one negative, cancel each other out. One positive and one negative to cancel each other out. What's left? Someone raise their hand and wait to be called on. What is left? Valerie?
One positive.
One positive. And how do we write that? We write it either like that or like that. Either way is acceptable. And so this is the visual method that I'm teaching. Does anyone have any questions on how this works? Good. So now let's build on this and move to the next level. Now all of a sudden, the chip method doesn't seem too practical. Because there's no way I'm drawing out 34 little circles and 21 little circles. That's crazy. So we're not going to. Could someone explain why we don't have to do anything? Why do we not have to do any method, really? Chelsea?
Because the signs are the same, we just have to add them.
Yeah, they're both negative. They're both negative numbers. And since they're both negative numbers, we don't have to worry about it because it's just one big pile of negatives. So if I have 34 negatives and 21 negatives, I just need to add them together and say how many negatives do I have overall? Could someone raise their hand and tell us? How many do I have overall? Natalie? Negative 55, or 55 negatives. So we don't really need a method anytime both are negative. Any questions? All right, so we've got a visual method that we can use, and we've got a simple thing we can do in certain cases, but now part D. Here's where the whole thing breaks down, because there's no way I'm drawing out 14 little circles and then 38 little circles, and they're not both the same, so I can't really use that. So now I have to come up with something else. And here's where you have to think a little bit higher level. Some of you may already know what to do, but I want you to follow along with me. So I have 14 plus negative 38. I want you to look not at the sign, but just at the digits. So that's 1, 4, and that's 3, 8. So if we're just looking at that, the 14 looks like it's smaller. Even though it's not a smaller number, it looks like it's smaller. So that's the number we're going to focus on. If I had the power to take this number away and replace it, I'd like to replace it with a number that will make the whole thing turn into 0. Could someone tell me what number would I have to put here so that the whole thing turned into 0? Angela?
14.
If I put a 14 in there, the whole thing's going to turn to 0?
Oh, I mean negative 14.
Okay. So negative 14. So I would have to put a negative 14 here, and then the expression would turn into 0. This is called a borrowing method, not the borrowing that you learned for subtracting years ago. But this is borrowing. So here's what we're going to do. I want to borrow 14 negatives from here to cancel out the 14 negatives here. Okay, I want to borrow 14. Okay, so I've got 14. So this is going to disappear. Plus, and I'm going to borrow 14 from here and put them down here, and they will cancel out and give me 0. So the question is, how many negatives do I have left after I borrow the 14 negatives? Tatiana? There are 24 negatives left. So I borrowed 14 negatives and they went down here. I'm left with 24 negatives. This canceled this, so what's my answer? What's the answer? Kiara? Negative 24. So if you can get your brain to start looking at things that way by saying to yourself, what would I have to take out of this number to cancel this one? And then how much would I have left over? That is a very effective way of adding integers. Okay? Comments, questions? Tristan?
Why can't you just do negative 38 minus 14?
Because that comes out to a totally different answer. Negative 38 minus 14 is not the same thing as negative 38 plus 14. So you're probably doing something on your calculator that's different than what you're saying. So you could clarify with me one-on-one in a few minutes. Okay, so if you already feel comfortable, great. If you don't worry about it. You're going to still try on your own. Checkpoint number 1, you got 3 questions. You don't have to copy the original questions, but you need to do something and then tell me the values. So you got 2 minutes. All All right, let's see how we did. Part A, what did we get? Essence, David, and then Alexis. What'd you get?
I got, -5.
-5.
-5.
The correct answer is -5 for part A. What about part B? What did we get? We'll start with Savannah, Steven, and then DeAndre.
-1. 17. +17.
Okay?
-17.
We have a massive disagreement. We have 3 different answers. Annie, and then Cameron X.
-17.
So you agree with DeAndre. What do you think?
-17.
So now we have more support for that answer. Cameron M.
-17.
The correct answer is -17. Part C was where you had to put in a bit more thought. We've got Tatiana, Kiara, and then Fancy.
-47.
-47.
It is -47. So, let me just look at part B for a moment, since there was a little confusion about part B. You either copied it wrong or you misunderstood what I said. When the signs are both negative, that's the easiest situation out of all 3 of these. Because this is a pile of negatives, that's a pile of negatives. When you put it together, you're making one big pile of negatives. So 8 negatives and 9 negatives is going to be 17 negatives, which we really say is -17. Does anyone have any questions about that? Yeah.
I put
That's what I thought. I said something, you probably copied it wrong. Okay, very good. Other questions? Good, so now let's build on this idea and go a little bit further. Example 2. What if you have more than 2 numbers to deal with? Anyone have any thoughts on what you would be comfortable doing? Tristan and then Chelsea. Tristan, what would you do?
I took order of operation.
Okay, well, it's all addition. When things are all one operation, you can just basically do them in any order. Doesn't really matter. There's a property up there, let me see, the associative property and the commutative property of addition says that when it's all addition, you can change the order and regroup them. So, Tatiana, let's build on that.
-9 plus
Why -9 plus -1? Because it comes first?
-1.
Ah, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, you can do the negatives first. Even if the -1 was over here, then it doesn't matter. They're all additions, so you do the negatives first, and it makes your life much easier. So, we've got -9, -1, that's -10, plus 8. Now you have to use your brain and use one of the methods that we've talked about. And what do we get when we do -10 plus 8? What do we get? Valerie? You get -2. Any questions on how we did that? So what you should do is start getting your brain used to looking for pairs of numbers that you should start with. Part B, what would you do first? What would you do first, Natalie?
18 plus 3.
And what is 18 plus 3? 21. So that's really easy to do. That's easy mental math. That's 21. And then we're going to add on the -12. And here, again, you could use the borrowing method, the visual method, whatever works for you. But what do we get when we do 21 and -12? Angela?
9.
Yeah, you get 9. Any questions?
Can you give me an example of how you would borrow?
Yep, very good. So, I'm not looking at the sign, I'm looking at the 12 and 21. The 12 is smaller. So I'm going to borrow from the 21, okay? So, I'd like to know what number should I put here so that this becomes a 0? 12. So I'm going to borrow 12 from here to put it here. How many are left here? I borrowed 12. How many are left? 9. So there's 9 left over, and that's why you get 9. Okay, does that make sense? And if I'm confusing you, if you had a different method that you used last year, that's totally understandable. George?
I did it a different way. I did 18 plus negative 12. I got 6 plus positive 6 plus 3, and I got positive 9.
Good. So there's more than one way to do it. Excellent. So let's see how we all do on our own now that we're getting more and more comfortable. Checkpoint number 2. This time you got 1 minute. All right, what did we get? Part A. We'll start with David, DeAndre, and then Cameron M. What'd you get?
Negative 8.
Negative 8.
Negative 8.
The correct answer is negative 8. What about part B? What did we get? We'll start with Alexis, then Nali, and then Amani. What'd you get? Okay. Okay. Okay, so we have 2 people who think it's negative 2. Catalina? Negative 2. Very good. But now I have an important follow-up question, and it kind of goes to what George was talking about a moment ago with the last example. How did you do part B? Those of you who got it right, how'd you do it? Cameron in the back?
Alright, because negative 1 plus positive 1 is 0, and then all you have left is negative 0.
Yeah, that's what I did myself. So what we just talked about was doing negatives first. So you might have added this, and you get negative 3. And then you add on 1, and you get negative 2. That's great. But if you could have recognized that you had opposites here that cancel each other out, all you have is negative 2 left.
If your problems when there's like one integer, I just go left and right. Like, I don't do it together.
Okay. Does that work for you? Okay. Very good. So, any other comments, questions? Okay, so now we're going to build on that. And we have to be able to take a real scenario, change it into math. So we want to be able to write an addition expression to describe the situation. So Roger owes his mom $5. He borrows another $6 from her, another $6 from her. So we want to write an addition expression to describe, and then we want to find the sum. So can someone help us? How do we write owes $5? How do we write that in math? Owing $5. Essence? Yeah, because when you owe someone money, you basically have a negative amount of money. So that's why we write negative 5. So then he's going to borrow $6 more. How do we represent borrowing 6? How do we represent borrowing 6, Chelsea? Positive 6 because you get the $6, right? But in actuality, when you borrow money, it's negative because you have to pay the money back. Okay? So borrowing and owing is actually the same thing. Borrowing money and owing money is really the same thing. So even though I totally understand why Chelsea said it's positive 6, it's actually not. We would represent this with a negative 6. How much money, and think of it this way, how much money does Roger owe his mother now? Chelsea? Negative 11, right? He owes his mother $11. Do you see why it has to be negative 6 now? So he owes his mother $11, which can be written as negative 11. And we got that by saying this plus this. Any questions about that? And what about a cyclist traveling downhill, and then the cyclist travels up the hill? How do we represent traveling downhill 125 feet? Fancy?
Negative 125.
Yeah, down is usually represented by negative. And then essence, that's not a 5. Negative 125. Essence, how would we represent going back uphill 50 feet? Positive 50. And so how much did she go up or down all together? Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. Adriana?
75 feet.
75 feet down or up?
Up.
Positive 75? How'd you figure that out?
I minus 50 from 75.
Okay, but this is positive and that one's negative. You said you minus this one from that.
I minus 125 from.
You did? Using a calculator?
Yeah.
Try it again. What'd you get this time?
75.
Okay, well, let me see, because sometimes my students are not typing in what they're saying. You're saying you did 50 minus 125? Are you typing in 50 minus 125?
No, I did the other way around.
Right, but I'm saying this is a negative number. How could you do 125 minus 50? That's not the same thing.
It just did it on my calculator.
But what I'm saying is, but you chose what to punch in the calculator. The calculator didn't do it magically by itself. You punched in numbers, right? Unfortunately, you punched the numbers in backwards. Because this is negative 125, that's positive 50. Think of it this way. Let's actually draw a mountain. She goes down 125. This was her starting point. And then she goes back up 50. What's the difference? What's this distance right here? This was her starting point. This was her end. Is she lower than she was, or is she higher than she was? Right, so if she had gone positive 75, she would have ended up somewhere up here, right? But she didn't, she ended up down here. So when you add these two numbers together, you get negative 75. So you have to be careful about what you're doing. You can't just put the numbers in any order that you want. Sorry. So this is actually negative 75. And let me, right there. Okay, are there any, because I feel like I'm losing some people. Are we understanding, confused? Tristan. Yes, I'm going to get everybody started on the classwork, and then I'm going to come to you and we're going to talk about it again. Okay? So, I actually had another example, but we're going to skip it because you're going to be working on it now. So everyone, draw a line across your paper. Your classwork is in the textbook. You're going to do page 32, numbers 27, 29, 35, 37, 45, 49, 51, 53. That's 8 questions. It should take you a little less than 15 minutes. As soon as you're ready, go ahead and get started. Okay, colored pens up. Let's see how you did. 27 and 29. 35 and 37. 45. Had 2 parts. The first, the position of the top of the lake from the surface was negative 3,743 meters, and then all the way to the bottom of the lake was negative 4,943 meters. Number 49 was 10. (51) is negative 2. And 53 was negative 18. If we count 45 as 2 separate questions, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 questions total. Make a fraction out of 9. Hopefully you got 7 out of 9 or 8 out of 9, 9 out of 9. That would be a good start. And then calculate your percent. Are there any questions on any of these? George?
Just on 45.
45? Other questions?
27, 45, 49, 51.
Okay, so let's start with 45. So here was the picture that you were given, and I did my own picture on the board. But now I can clarify that this distance from here to here is 3,623. This distance right here is 120. You were being asked to find the distance from here to here. What do you have to do to get that distance? Fancy?
Add 3,623 meters plus 120 meters.
Yeah, you had to add these 2 numbers together. This distance plus this distance will give you the whole distance from here to here. And that's where we get negative 3,743. The second question wanted to know what would that distance be plus the distance all the way to the bottom of the lake. the distance all the way to the bottom of the lake, this was another 1,200 meters. That was in the text of the question. So now you have to add this, this, and this all together. And that's where we get the negative 4,943. Yes, George.
The reason why I got A wrong is because I messed up. I subtracted 120 from 3,623. That's 3,000.
I understand. Why did you subtract them?
I just was about 9%.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, DeAndre, I know you had other questions. I'm short on time, so I'm going to have to work with you individually. Everybody draw a line across your paper. Draw a line across your paper. Your homework is on page 32. You're doing numbers 24 to 40 even, 48 to 54 even, and then 62 to 68 even. It seems like a lot, but it's not. It's only 19 questions. None of these parts are optional. Write it all down correctly. You are going to have your test on chapter 1 next week. As soon as you are done copying down your homework, you may put the textbooks away, pack up your belongings, and head out.